Great. Well, we'll get started here. Building confidence with your money. Class number 4. Can you believe it? We made it through all the other classes. Last week, if you missed it, we talked about emergency funds, saving strategy, intro to investing, understanding employer benefits, insurance basics, and avoiding fraud and financial scams. Just gonna close out of that. What is a big purchase? That's what we're talking about this week is big purchases, right? These are large expenses that impact your finances long term. They usually require savings, financing or loans. So something that you have to think about before you start doing, right? You have to maybe submit documents, um, save for long term, make big decisions. You need to, uh, you know, save money, that kind of thing. It matters because you want to prevent debt overload. You can get better interest rates if you finance at the right time, and it keeps you in line with your monthly budget and reduces financial stress. So big purchases don't have to be something that are going to put you into the hole, right? They could just be transitioning from renting to owning, or transitioning from a car payment to maybe not a car payment, or no car payment and a high upkeep to a car payment, right? First, we're going to talk about buying a home, right? That's the biggest, probably one of the biggest purchases you could make in your lifetime. Some of the upfront costs of buying a home, the down payment, it's about 20% of the total cost of the home, if you're getting a traditional or conventional mortgage. There are some other programs available where you would not have to put that 20% down, of the cost of the home. Like a first-time homeowner's loan, a farm credit loan, things like that, can not ha do not have closing costs, or excuse me, down payments sometimes. There's also VA. Those just depend on your eligibility. Closing costs, they're 2 to 5% of the total loan amount. So this will be due at closing, right? They cannot be taken or put into your loan. You have to pay them upfront, right? So if you have a loan that's $100,000, you might have 2 to 5% of that loan in closing costs, so $200 to $500. Inspections, they can be between $300 and $550 in South Dakota. Depends on your square footage. If they have to inspect a home that is, you know, 3 stories, has a crawl space, a full basement, etc. It's going to be a little bit more costly than if you just had a single story home, um, or a ranch style home. This is just talking about the ongoing costs. A mortgage at 6% costs $1,800 per month. At 8%, which is, pretty typical right now, it's going to cost $2,200 per month. So you need to think about that when you're thinking about buying a home. But, also on top of it, you need to think about dating the rate. What they say is date the rate, marry the home, right? So you can refinance. I was talking to my mom about this, a couple of days ago, and that's what they did when they purchased their home in the 90s. They had a very high interest rate, so they ended up refinancing when it went down. And it ended up saving them quite a bit of money. So you just have to do the math there. What is it going to save? Interest adds up very, very quickly. Um, so you got to think about that. Property taxes. Those sometimes are included in your mortgage, depending on what type of mortgage you have. If it has an escrow account, it's going to include the property taxes and the insurance, and that can make your loan payment go up or down, right, from year to year. I have had only one time in my 8 years of owning homes that it went down and I got money back. I was overpaying on my insurance, luckily, because they had estimated it high. And the property taxes too can influx. They can go up or down, usually, up as time progresses. But that depends. Also, if I haven't already mentioned, you do want to uh, shop for home insurance from year to year. I know it's a pain, and it's time consuming, but the fact is that insurance is very different from company to company. Or if you're even thinking about buying a home, it is pretty, typical for homeowners to shop around for insurance. When my husband and I were buying our home, it was like $500 difference from one insurance company to the next per year. So obviously we went with the lower insurance. Maintenance, if you have a home or you are thinking about owning a home, even in a rental, there's maintenance to keep up. The water heater might go out, you might get wear and tear on your flooring or even in your wall where you need to like replace or patch the wall. Utilities, obviously, you need heat and gas and electricity and water for your home too. So those are ongoing costs as well. And anybody knows utilities can fluctuate from month to month. There are programs out there though that you can get on a payment plan for those higher months on utilities. These are some documents you'll need. I have bought three homes in my life just because of personal growth and moving. So I do know that there are quite a bit of um, IDs, different things you need for documentation, right? It seems like it's never ending. But I promise you, that is why it is a good idea to have a relationship with your lender, right? So, and to start off, if you're thinking about buying a home, collect all this information. So when they ask for it, you can give it to them in a timely manner, right? So you need your government issued ID of driver's license or passport, or, if you're a tribal member, you could do something along the tribe's guidelines too. A social security number or card, proof of residency sometimes, depending on your loan, sometimes they want to know that you live in South Dakota or elsewhere, or where you've lived. Income and employment, pay stubs for the last 30 days. They want to see what you're making, to see that you can pay back your loan. W-2s from the last 2 years. They like to see employment history. Have you been at your job for 2 years or more? Or have you, moved jobs recently? Tax returns from the last 2 years as well. What are you making you know, annually and throughout the past 2 years? Especially if you're self-employed, these are really essential. And it's a little bit harder to get a loan if you're self-employed. But you should have this information ready. 2 years of business tax returns, profit and loss statements, and 1099s if applicable. That just depends on how you pay yourself. Whoops. Decided to skip to the end. Okay, sorry about that. You also need your bank statements. 2 to 3 months of all the pages, even the blank ones. They do not like you to skimp out on that. Retirement account statements. If you have a 401k, an IRA, etc., they need to know this in case you need to use it in an emergency situation. a proof of your down payment source. If are getting down payment assistance, which Grow South Dakota does have, you would need to have them communicate with your lender that you have that down payment assistance. Um, you can be gifted down payment from someone, but then you would need a letter if someone's helping you to document that gift. It does get a little hairy if you are being gifted the down payment. So just work with your banker to see what exactly they need and what they'd like to show. Credit and debits, you need permission for a credit check. They're going to do a hard pull on your credit. Statements from your current loans, student loans, car loans, credit cards, they want to see what your debt to income ratio is. If you are have a very large amount of debt and the income is just covering that, they may not grant you a loan, divorce decree or child support, if that's applicable. Property specific documents you might need. You need a signed purchase agreement. Um, if you're going through a realtor or a lawyer's office, they should have this with both your signature and the seller's signature as well. Earnest money receipt. You don't have to provide earnest money in South Dakota, but if you do, it goes into an account, and then it goes towards your closing costs. Right, so you want to keep that documentation. Some people do provide earnest money, especially for like homes that are selling fast or have lots of interest of buyers or different things like that. A homeowner's insurance quote. You have to have homeowner's insurance if you have a loan on your home. And they will call you on it, or force place insurance if you do not get insurance um, within their allotted amount of time. And you don't want the force place insurance. It is so much more expensive than a regular homeowner's insurance quote would be. An appraisal. You usually have to have these. They're ordered by your lender, so they can use that information for their own records and make sure that it is not compromised. Title information. This is all handled by the title company, but it's kind of interesting for me to see what exactly goes into buying a home, right? They're gonna have, all your information on the house, if there's any liens in the house, if you have any easements on the house, different things like that. Your property line, your property survey, that will all be handled by them. Sometimes they ask your rent history. That's just more if you are not having other sources of, showing your payment history if you don't have credit cards or anything like that. Explanation letters, if you have credit issues, job gaps, or large deployments, excuse me, deposits. So I know my brother, when he bought his house, he had to have an explanation letter for a large deposit because he had sold his extra vehicle and put that into his account while he was closing on the home, and they wanted to know about that. So that's just an example. Totally legit. He had to show the sale contract, but they needed to know about that just to make sure that everything was kosher. Bankruptcy or foreclosure papers, if that's applicable, you would have those on file, and they may ask you more information on that. Uh, this is just pro tip from me. Create a home buying folder, excuse me, digital paper. I know when I've applied for loans recently, they're all online. Um, and I just went and sent out what I needed. Um, I was very prompt, excuse me, with my lender, um, because I wanted the process to go quickly and smoothly. Um, It just depends on timing of things too. If you have like, taxes right now, they might want your taxes for 2025. You just got to get them done, or they could take last year's taxes. Some questions. Can I afford my monthly payment? Do I plan to stay long term? Right? So just because you don't plan to stay long term doesn't mean you necessarily um don't want your home. You might just finance it differently, right? So if you only plan to stay for a couple years, maybe you want a balloon loan with a short or with a lesser payment that is going to, balloon, blow up, get bigger in 5 years or so. Those are some things that you gotta ask yourself. Is it a starter home? Is it your forever home? Is it just an in-between home? And then the monthly payment's very important. You don't want to be house poor. That's a term that we use where you can afford your house technically on paper, right? But you might have some expenses that you don't put on paper that are causing you to feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck, or having issues paying your mortgage, right? The cost of groceries going up, daycare, schooling, different things like that can all affect your monthly payment. So think about really realistically, what can you afford? Just because the bank says you can afford a certain amount doesn't mean they know the ins and outs of your finances. Pivot here to buying a car. Um, the upfront cost of buying the car pretty similar to a house, right? Except for instead of the closing costs, it's the registration and taxes, right? So you need to pay sometimes a down payment on the car, depending on where you're going, what you're buying, if you're financing or not. And then you need to go to the courthouse and do the registration and taxes. The registration and taxes is about 10% of the amount of the cost of the vehicle. Um, Obviously that can vary slightly depending on the where you're located. Ongoing costs, you have your loan payment if you finance it, insurance, gas and maintenance. You don't want to just have, thousands and thousands of miles on your car without getting an oil change or changing the tires. There is upkeep to having a vehicle that you do need to think of. This is just a little new versus used car, um, pros and cons. Buying new, it's reliable. There's no wear and mystery history. You have a manufacturer warranty usually. Lower maintenance costs at first. Um, Safety and tech. Do you have hands-free listening, hands-free calling? Do they detect the crash around you? Does it detect if your tire pressure is low, things like that. Better financing incentives. Sometimes you have lower interest rates, rebates. You can customize your vehicle sometimes if you want to pay more. You can choose the color, trim, features. Cons. It is a higher purchase price, obviously. New versus used is higher. Depreciates fast. You can lose up to 20 to 30% of the value of your car within the first year. And then obviously higher insurance costs too, because it costs more to replace the vehicle. And you do have to have insurance on that vehicle as well. Full coverage generally is what I'm meaning. The fees add up, you have a shipping price to the dealer. Um, you can have different things if you have a higher trim level on a car, different things like that add up. A used car usually are a much lower price. Like I said, that depreciation. So if you buy a car that was, made in 2020 versus 2026, it's going to be a lot cheaper to buy. A slower depreciation. When you buy your car used. Usually within the first year is when it loses the most value. A lower insurance cost. If you don't have a loan on your car, then you wouldn't have to have full coverage on your car. You could just have the liability cover insurance. Depending on the on what your car is, you may want to have full coverage too, because if you're like me and you hit a deer and it ruins the front of your car, it would have cost more than my insurance that I pay monthly to fix the vehicle. You can have the certified pre-owned options sometimes, depending on the history of the vehicle. And then the cons, you don't know what happened to the vehicle. You don't know if it has rust or different things like that. You might take it into your mechanic before you purchase it and see if there's any issues with it. And then it can have a higher cost as the car ages. The more miles you put on it, the more, damage and things happen to your car. And then fewer tech and safety features. They're always coming out with something new. What you need to buy a car: a valid driver's license, a proof of residency. They want to know where you live. Social security number if you are financing. And then you need your most recent pay stubs. They want to see that you can afford the vehicle, right? The W-2s or tax returns. And then make sure you have employment. So they'll ask your contact his information. I have worked at many places where they call and validate that somebody works there or not. So they do check that. This is the final thing I'm going to talk about for big purchases, right? All of these kind of flow within the same realm, right? They're just the big life purchases, the things that are going to cost the most in life: vehicles, homes, and education, right? I just finished paying off my college debt like this year, and I have been out of school for 10 years. I mean, they are a big cost, and it does follow you for quite some time. So you have the tuition, the supplies, the living expenses on top of everything else. This is talking about how to apply for student loans. You can fill out the FAFSA, uh, review your financial aid offer. So whatever FAFSA offers to you, you can accept the federal student loans, which is the FAFSA, and then just decide if you need more money, right? Um, Student loans, the FAFSA, when I was in school, it went on your parents' income. Obviously, you don't have income well, sometimes when you're younger. And then the Parent Plus loans, if you need them, or private student loans, depending on what are approved for. This is talking about when you pay back student loans. Your federal loans, the repayment starts within 6 months after leaving school, excuse me. Some private loans require payment when in school. So it would be kind of similar to like an installment loan where you need to start paying it back right away. Excuse me. FAFSA, when can you apply? It reopens every year on October 1st. Um, it recommends, um, you know, applying for everything between, um, you know, January and March. So, and then the federal guideline and deadline is the 30th of June. So there's just a little example there: June 30th for the 2026 to the 2027 year. But it says don't wait that long. Like I said, or excuse me, many schools want your financial aid submitted between January and March. Some states as early as December. So make sure when you are applying for school or your children or whoever you're assisting is applying for school that you decide when you need to apply for FAFSA. Um, and then I just had saw that rule of thumb there on the internet to apply by February 1st if you can. So if you have something like that you're working on, it is good to get that done as soon as possible. So just some takeaways, right? We talked about buying a home, buying a vehicle, student loans, different things that you need for these different purchases. Basically, you need all of your employment history, your income, your debt, where you work, everything like that. Everything you think you could need, you probably need when buying a home. Vehicles a little less, you need your income and your home and they'll pull your credit report too. Just one other thing I want to mention during this class is if you are looking to buy a home, it is very important in the closing process that you do not make any other purchases during that time that will pull your credit or affect your credit. I know a few people that they were in the process of buying their home and then they went and bought a vehicle as well. Well, the hard pull on their credit affected it so much that they were no longer able to buy the home. So you really have to think about what's important to you. You don't want to waste people's time or energy, your banker or your realtor or whoever is helping you with that. Thank you for attending. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat now, or you can unmute, and I would be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll give you back some of your day today. Okay. Thank you so much, and I'll send out a recording too at the end here.